Hello and welcome to the Now We Know show, the show where we discuss a topic of interest and by the end we will have learnt something new and hopefully you will too. I'm Jack.
I'm Zach.
And I'm Buzz.
And today we will be discussing the controversial topic, would you say?
Yeah.
Well, it has become that, I think.
Yes, over the last couple of years I'd say it's
considering the research I've been doing into the subject, I think this one is delving into the controversial when originally we thought this would be a subject of just looking at a myth.
Yes. It's kind of it's become almost like one of those internet memes as well, isn't it?
Yeah. So the listeners are going to be wondering what we're talking about. So
yes.
What's the topic to this week?
Flat Earth.
Right. So this is the flat Earth. As I say,
or as we should say, the theory of flat Earth.
The theory of flat Earth. I mean, again, originally I was coming from when I was asked to look into this. I was looking at it from really a myth,
Yes.
not so much even as a theory. And it's transcended more to now being a conspiracy, really, rather than even that. So, so what we're going to do is we're going to be discussing the flat Earth theory and why it seems to have become a conspiracy. It's going to all play out as we discuss this, I'm sure. Come to maybe our conclusions at the end of this podcast.
Yes, it's also good to note that none of us here believe the flat Earth theory as such, but we're going to try and stay as open-minded as possible.
What we're trying to do is with all our Now We Know show podcasts is to be as neutral as we can be. So you, the listener, can decide, hopefully at the end, from everything you've learnt, you can make your own educated decision on how you feel about a certain subject.
Yeah, how do you feel?
And of course, we're, pardon the pun, probably going to be scratching the surface of the flat Earth tonight because it is such a huge. I mean, it's far bigger than I imagined it would be.
Yeah, especially doing the research.
Yeah,
exactly.
There's even kind of like misinformation within the flat Earth community. It would seem that there's kind of disagreements.
There's flat Earth societies which are
counter flat Earth societies.
Counter flat Earth, they're tooth and claw at each other.
Who knows who to believe?
One flat Earth society is accusing the other ones of being in with the CIA and the Masons and all sorts.
I think the best thing to do is kind of make an informed decision by yourself.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, but there is also a lot of science that would suggest that the Earth is a globe.
Well,
it's not exactly kind of up for debate as much as they would like to think it is.
Yes,
I think we've all done a bit of research, and we've not discussed it between each other, so we don't know what we've discovered along the lines. I've already nominated that I would try and defend flat Earth.
Yes, we need a kind of balance.
So I'm going to try and my best to defend flat Earth from the information that I've gleaned listening to people who are 100% convinced that the Earth is flat. So I'm going to try my best to do that. And to start off with, I think we all agree what we'd do is we'd ask the computer for its definition of what flat Earth is. So we're going to go over to the computer and ask that question. So computer, what is flat Earth?
In fact, the Earth is not flat. Ancient Greek philosophers and astronomers first proved this fact, and the circumnavigation of the Earth by explorers Ferdinand Magellan and Juan Sebastian Elcano, which lasted from 1519 to 1522, further demonstrated it. Isaac Newton later established that the Earth was an ellipsoid instead of a sphere.
Oh, and there we have it. So that's the computer's take on flat Earth.
The computer seemed quite
convinced
that it wasn't flat.
It's not flat.
That was almost her first
Seems
first
well
line.
Informed. Yeah. Seems well informed.
Her first line was, "The Earth isn't in fact flat."
Which is going to make my defence of that probably a lot harder. So who's going to kick off?
Okay. Well,
are we kicking off a disc or are we kicking off a spherical object?
Well, I don't know, because there's a lot of questions, and it doesn't just involve the actual shape of the Earth, but it also involves
it's an ellipsoid now.
Well, things like the sun and the moon.
Yeah.
Like, if the Earth is a disc, then is the moon a sphere?
How does that work?
Is it
Right, so let's have a look. From what I gather, the flat Earth. Let's just take it straight on the nose as far as the flat Earth societies and those individuals that I've listened to on both podcasts, YouTube. I've looked at documentaries as well. There was one called Beyond the Curve. I don't know if anybody else.
Oh yeah, that was good. I watched
watched
that.
one.
I've heard of it, haven't seen it.
Yeah, and looked at these. So, taking it from a flat Earth perspective, we're already done and dust. 100% the Earth is flat. It's
Okay.
a flat disc.
Right.
Again, there are variations on this, but most of the flat Earth believers, what's come to me in my research is that flat Earth disc is surrounded by a 200-foot ice wall.
Okay.
Don't laugh.
Don't
Sorry.
lie. We're trying to stay very neutral.
We're trying to stay neutral, which contains the oceans and the
Right.
land mass. So you're not going to be going from, say, England and flying around a spherical object or a elliptoid or whatever you want to call it to Australia. You will literally be going in a straight line
Across a plane.
across a plane
So
to
this is
Australia.
kind of Game of Thronesy with this ice wall.
Yeah, so you got the ice wall, which I'm sure we're going to be dipping in and out of all this information, which is primarily what comes to me on this is that the ice wall can be found at the Antarctic. Obviously, if you're believing in the flat Earth as
Yes.
being a truth, then there isn't a North and South Pole as such. And what people that believe in the spherical Earth consider to be Antarctica is actually where you've gone to the edge of the disc. This is where you meet the ice wall.
Okay. 200-foot ice wall.
200 ice wall, and then the whole Earth, the flat Earth, is covered by a dome. For best
Ooh.
Okay.
best way to
so
put it.
we
The
have
way
our
way
shape.
one person described it was, if you go into a planetarium and you sit there in your seat and you're looking at the stars and the constellations, and which obviously are made up of stars, and the planets, etc., and you walk outside.
Mhm.
Outside is just a bigger planetarium, to try and put it into a simple term.
Right. Okay.
So is this like a solid dome? Are we under a giant?
Okay, so this is the issue, because from everything that I've tried to discover about flat Earth, it seems to be that because we're going to obviously talk about space travel and etc. But flat earthers believe that you cannot go more than 62 miles. I think it was 62, not 65, but 62 miles up into the atmosphere. Then you hit an invisible barrier. It's impossible to go higher than that.
Right.
But the dome itself, this ether or whatever, and they use different terms to describe this dome, is thousands upon thousands of miles high.
Okay.
But you can't get that high because there's this invisible barrier that if you go up
Yeah.
65 miles or 62 miles or whatever it was they've calculated, then you just hit this barrier.
Yeah. So of course, I have a few questions.
Yeah,
Now
yeah.
we've learned
Well,
about.
so
I think we all have a few
So
questions.
I'm
about
here.
this.
I'm the defence here
Yes.
as best as I can.
One thought that comes to mind: if we're in, I would assume, a sealed dome, what is oxygen? What are we breathing? Surely we should be running out of
Well,
oxygen if we're kind of in
it's
like
a very good question.
That's
hamster
interesting. I
ball.
didn't think of that one.
It's a very good question. I think we should go fundamentally to, this is why the flat Earth, for me, from my research, has gone from being the theory or myth of flat Earth to being the conspiracy of flat Earth, because we have to ask ourselves, before answering that question, why do people believe 100% the Earth is flat and not a sphere? And that is that the sphere idea is a complete lie, in order that those, or they always refer to them as them, or they,
And who are they?
they control everybody.
Mm.
And one of the biggest things that they use to control your mind is this whole concept of growing up and being taught that we live on a sphere, which is impossible.
But why?
Because once you believe that, then you believe all the other lies you're told. But once you set your mind free and you understand the concept of the flat Earth, and that you realise the flat Earth is the truth,
This sounds like this is the be-all and end-all of everything.
then it frees your mind and you realise all the things that we're being lied to.
Yes.
about. So when it comes to those kind of things like where does oxygen come from? Well, obviously you get photosynthesis from plants, and plants taking carbon dioxide, release oxygen, and that's just a circular thing that's occurring all the time. When it gets to certain areas of research into flat Earth, the answer that keeps coming back to me, and this is, I've got to be serious, this is the answer, the only answer I can give to you, is because it's such a big conspiracy, the spherical Earth, that people have not been allowed to research flat Earth. And so questions like that can't actually be fully answered at this moment because more research needs to go into it.
That's convenient.
Yeah.
But that's because they won't allow it to
Right.
be looked at. They try and stop people at every corner.
The great they.
Go back
Who
to
are
the-
they?
go-
That's what I want to know. Are they
Well,
aliens?
you say that, but they seem to be, again, looking at the research from the flat Earth perspective, repeatedly it comes up that the Masons, the Masonic lodges, are all great
The Masons? What are they?
demons or
Demons?
satanic cults
Cultists.
that control everybody.
So there's a kind of supernatural element to this.
This is why it went from being just researching into a theory as becoming a total conspiracy because it becomes a layer upon layer of conspiracy, with the biggest lie being that we're on a spherical planet. So, and to emphasize this, we don't know. If you say, well, has anybody travelled to the ice wall, for example, at the South Pole? To answer that question would be people aren't allowed to go to the South Pole.
Yeah.
All the government, or they who are in charge, won't let anybody go to the South Pole
Right.
under the auspice that they're trying to keep it protected and not polluted by... Only a few people get permission to go there, because if you went there, then you discover the truth, that it's not a continent, but that you have reached the ice wall, the edge of the disc.
What is beyond this ice wall?
Again,
Or on the dome?
Yeah.
again,
We're in the dome, but we
we're
don't
in
know
the
what's
dome.
outside the dome.
Again, this seems to be very much a kind of almost starts going to a spiritual belief as to explaining the different energies and things that are given off from the ether, from the dome itself. And when it comes to, again, beyond the ice wall, only today did I discover another outlook from flat earthers that actually that ice wall, there are continents beyond Antarctica, that Antarctica is the edge of our flat earth and the continents we know, the countries we know. But beyond that, there are countries we have not seen yet.
I saw this. I saw a map that was obviously flat, and the ice wall, as you were saying, had like a gap in it, and then the water kind of went through the gap, and there was other land around it.
That's right. So there's these
with another ice wall,
there are other continents out there,
which I thought
that
was
are
crazy,
far in advance of our civilization, that they don't want us to know about because they want to use those resources for themselves.
So are you saying that
And
they are there?
Well, those
Or are they
the peoples,
inside the dome with
peoples
us?
that
They're certainly
live,
trying to keep something secret.
the peoples that live on those continents, and they did mention some names.
So they
of
are
them,
inhabited,
but,
then, supposedly.
supposedly, and if they visit our part of the flat Earth, then they're kind of, rather than calling extraterrestrials, which are impossible because as far as flat Earthers are concerned, you just cannot travel across interstellar space that doesn't exist outside the dome. So you get visited by inner terrestrials from these other continents.
Right. Okay.
I
I was about to say that makes sense, but it doesn't.
It's an
but
intriguing
you know what I mean?
concept.
Do you think
But anyway, there
On
must
a-
be hundreds of questions you want to ask, so it's gone.
on a which I would try not to generalize too much because to my knowledge we don't know anyone that is a flat earther,
Okay.
but I'd like to know more of the kind of social side of things. Do you think being a flat earther or kind of being in that group, do you think gives people a social side of
Definitely.
like a kind of,
Definitely. I think there are
do you know what I mean?
there are lots of different psychological aspects to the human psyche, and people, or you get as over the pandemic you can't help but notice, the people throw around buzzwords like sheeple, if you follow it, or if you're going to have your vaccinations and you follow the rules, you're one of the sheep, etc., etc., and you get all these kind of things, and your conspiracy theorists are going, you're being injected, and you're going to have tracking devices, and whatever your thoughts on the coronavirus, the pandemic are. That's not what we're discussing today, but the same psychological approach, I think, happens in certain individuals have a certain way their minds work when it comes to a belief philosophy.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so once you find something that maybe welcomes you in, you're either going to be one of the leaders in that. You see that you've got a certain control. Maybe you don't even see it as a control, as a negative control, but you've got a position where you are a leader within a group, and other people are more than happy to follow you in that group because they need something to believe in.
Yes.
So you've got that belief mentality.
So are they not giving in to the very thing they're denying?
In what sense?
Like for the fact that conspiracies, they're saying that everything is a conspiracy. Are they not themselves
Feeding that by making up a conspiracy.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, really, I suppose, because when you've got that belief mentality, depending on what it is, whether it's religion or, as we're talking about here, flat Earth, which again is many-layered, because it would strike me that most people that believe in flat Earth also have a lot to say on loads of other conspiracy theories. That once it's in there, you have to question whether some people that are in charge, that have got the main podcasts or YouTube channels to listen to, or they're going off and doing the rallies and the seminars, and they're selling merchandise, etc. They make a living out of it.
Yeah, it's almost like they're tricking people.
Well, they probably don't see that they are. From the perspective of somebody that believes or accepts the science of a spherical planet, then you're going to come from the perspective of these people are
Teachers.
snake. Well, no, you're looking at the flat earthers. You're going to say these are snake oil sellers. These are people that are just making money off of other people that are more gullible.
Kind of exploiting them.
Exploiting them.
Yeah. Exploitation.
But then those people that truly believe and follow aren't seeing themselves as being exploited or being sheeple or anything.
Because they're buying into it.
Yeah, they're buying into it, but they'd say exactly the same as somebody who is into a spherical Earth. You're being lied to. You've accepted this hook, line, and sinker, and you are believing the biggest lie that there is, and you're being controlled. And we're free.
Yeah.
We freed our minds.
It almost gives them kind of how would you phrase it? Kind of a moral high ground. In not necessarily moral, but you know what I mean, like a kind of better than someone else because they know the truth, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you're going to get that. You're going to get that in many aspects. Whatever you believe in, whatever you follow. Maybe even down to like your football teams. If my football team is better than your football team, or my martial arts better than your martial art, you're going to get hooked into
Tribalism.
Yeah. And the thing is, people relish their defiance in the face of logic.
Yes.
So when it comes to something like flat Earth, they will grab hold of the smallest piece of evidence that they feel is backing them up. And push that to prove a point and ignore every other thing that is telling them that it is that what is correct. So I think maybe what we need to go for a moment is to go right back and say, well, where does this come from? Where does the flat Earth...
I would like to know the history of... Because obviously we're aware that probably before any GPS systems or anything like this, before we had the technology to prove that we were on a globe.
So I'm interested. What did you guys find in your research?
There was probably a point where everyone thought the Earth was flat because we didn't have any other means to say that it was a globe. So when did we go from one case of affairs to the other case of affairs?
Wasn't it to do with the Greeks?
Well, if you're talking Western culture, then that would be one avenue. But we have to look on a worldwide, whether that be flat or spherical aspect. And you say, if you've got Western cultures feeling that the Mediterranean, Rome, Greece, everywhere where Egypt and outwards is kind of the centre of when these empires have been at their heights and then crashed, etc. That's where your ideas are developing. But mustn't forget that opposite side of the world, you've got continents like Australia, where the Aborigines have been basically untouched till Western ships managed to reach Australia. Up until that time, they would have had their own theories of their gods, their spirits, and the world they lived in. And the same with South America before the Spanish got there, and so on and so forth. So all cultures are going to, over the thousands of years, will have developed their understanding of the world around them. And without science, as we see science today, those societies would probably just much like today, some people are more than happy to get up in the morning, do their job, do whatever amuses them, go back and do the job again, and repeat that for the rest of their life, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And don't look further than that. But some people say, oh, what is over the horizon? What is past that next mountain? Yeah, I want to explore. I want to understand where I am in this life.
It's seemingly infinite.
I don't know where I am. I walk to the edge of the land that I'm on, and I hit sea.
Yeah. What's beyond the...
I walk to maybe the opposite side, and there's sea.
Do you think...
What's beyond that? And so people have got to start, I would have thought, right back from the beginnings of mankind. And let me get this right, actually, from the perspective, again, we're talking, or I was just talking from the perspective of humans evolving. But there's a lot of people out there that don't see us as creatures that have evolved. They see the planet only being 6,000 years old. We came from Adam and Eve, or many other cultures with their own religions.
So no dinosaurs.
Well, I've met non-religious people who won't accept dinosaurs.
It could be dragons.
That's a whole. I'm sure the dinosaurs do come. I'm sure that comes into the flat Earth. But funnily enough, I've not come across anything. Has anybody come across that in their research for flat Earth?
No.
Dinosaurs? No. So people, we mustn't forget that when we're talking about this particular subject, that some people are coming from it, not from us, from where their minds are thinking human beings have developed theories and ideas over thousands of years, but actually not only not developed the ideas themselves, but through the religious scriptures have been told that the earth is flat.
And therefore
It's
it must
flat.
be true.
Exactly. And that is definitely where you have belief mentality kicking in, because if you are suddenly told, you've been brought up, you believe a certain religious
Path.
doctrine,
Yeah.
So if you believe in, for example, let's take the Bible, and where it says in the Bible the earth is flat, blah, 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 you will then suddenly, when somebody turns around and says, well, no, it's not flat, then you suddenly have this kind
Contradiction.
of this conflict, which says, hang on a minute, all my life I've believed in the word of God as being truth.
I have been told this.
Now
yes.
I'm being told that part of that, a very big part of that,
Is wrong.
That throws into doubt the rest of my belief, if that can
and
be wrong.
their entire life.
Yes. So then they reject that immediately and say, no way. No way, guys. That is wrong.
I am fine. I
fine.
have my homeostasis.
Yes, I know the earth is flat. I've been told through.
You're wrong.
You're wrong. Whatever you tell me is lies, because that's Satan. That's back to those.
You're hired by the government.
It's back to them again. It's the
The big
CIA
them.
or whoever. Yeah.
There's always this kind of thing about how it's come up recently with Australia. There's another kind of conspiracy theory that Australia doesn't exist because.
Oh yes, no, I did see that. Yeah, carry on.
My point is that a lot of the
It's
time,
actors, isn't it?
a lot of the time people think
What,
that.
people are hired?
Yeah. That's what you're talking about, isn't it, Jack?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that Australia doesn't exist, and they're all actors.
Where?
Carry on, Jack.
Are they beyond the wall?
A lot of the time, because we can't see it,
Yep.
therefore it doesn't exist. Do you think there's kind of a reliance on information now that we kind of we're kind of expected to believe this stuff? I'm going from I want you to convince me that the Earth is flat.
Well,
Right.
Do you think
Okay.
people get sucked in that way when they think
there's
because
quite a lot
because
of
I've not been
misinformation out there,
because
isn't
I've
there?
not been high enough and I haven't seen the curvature of the Earth.
Well,
All I've seen is pictures. So
The-
these
the-
pictures could be CGI.
yeah,
they
well,
could be
that's exactly
altered.
Or a cartoon.
defending the flat Earth theory from the perspective of the flat earthers. That's exactly what I would be saying to you right now. If you say to me, "Well, I've seen pictures from space, or even from high altitude craft which show the curvature of the Earth," the answers that I have come to glean from the flat Earth is that either they're using fisheye lenses, which if you look at something that's flat, but you look through a fisheye lens, it gives it the impression of curvature. But you can't go, as I say, into space
Right.
because you can't get that high. You hit this invisible barrier.
So
All that is lies. All that is
rockets.
false. Rockets, all the Bezos going up with Blue Origin, and Elon Musk with his Starlink satellites. That's all CGI.
But why
It's
would
all-
they fake that?
Because they are probably all in league with the Satanic Masons, or whomever they are.
What are Masons?
Well, it's a society which we haven't actually looked into that, but the Masons, there's many different societies around, and generally because they stem from the 1800s. I don't know if they go back further than that. Probably. I mean, people talk about
a
the
secret
Illuminati.
So is it a terminology for this?
People
big
like
they?
the term secret society. Maybe we should do a podcast.
If you'd like to hear an episode on secret societies,
Secret societies. Yeah,
The Illuminati. There you go.
the Illuminati. Yeah. So even in this initial episode, we're touching so much. So people call it a secret society because when you can't go through the door, what's happening behind that door is obviously secret. And a lot of these things would have been or are the members are high society, rich people. The idea of the Masons is I'm not a Mason, so I don't know exactly what happens behind closed doors. I have done work at a Masonic lodge before. I've met Masons at the lodge, and they all seem perfectly nice people, and they seem to be very much in that what they do as Masons is they help raise money and do things for societies and things, but without wanting themselves to get any praise for it. That's what they do. They have their Masonic lodge. What happens behind closed doors in that lodge is, I don't know. I dare say a lot of, I scratch your back, you scratch mine kind of goes on probably.
So,
But the impression I got from when I was talking to some Masons at a Masonic lodge was that their whole outlook is they like to help the needy, but without having any praise back to them. They do it without.
so they are actually a thing then?
Yeah, the Masons are, yeah, definitely.
Huh, I did not know that. I thought it was just this kind of way of describing these supposed people that
No,
are in charge of everything.
There are lots of different types of lodges and things, but the Masons are probably the most well known.
if we bring this back to
Yeah, bring it back to the flat
Flat
Earth.
Earth, we've got a secret society episode in the making already.
Yeah.
My question from earlier about how, for example, I've never been to the International Space Station.
Yep.
Probably likely never will.
Yep.
Why should I believe that is actually a thing that's going around the Earth at this point?
Okay, well, this is where I'm kind of like flip-flopping from one. I'm trying to defend flat
Yeah.
Earth, but I'm also, since I was a child, been an amateur astronomer. So I'm in my late 50s now, so I've spent years and years looking through telescopes, looking at planets, far distant galaxies and nebula gas clouds and all sorts. And as far as the flat earthers are concerned, they're just shimmering lights on the inside
So
of
the
dome.
moon, the sun,
The moon and the sun are the same size,
right?
and they rotate within the dome. They move around the
So
dome.
surely you'd see
So-
both at the same time.
Well, you've got to think. No, it's difficult to conceive. You've got to try and take it that if the sun is over Australia,
Which doesn't exist.
that beaming down on Australia, and then the moon's over the opposite side of the flat Earth.
Right.
So You're not seeing the sun. It's like a
So-
torch beaming down.
So it kind of rotates around the dome.
Yes, they both rotate around the dome.
How do I see a sunset?
And how does it rise?
Why do I see the sun fall past the horizon
Good question.
of an evening?
Good question. And from the flat Earth's
I'd
perspective,
love to hear your answer, Basil.
from the flat Earth perspective, is we need to do more research into that.
Right. So everything you're met with, every question is met with a we don't know.
Unfortunately, it's either we don't know, it needs more research, or it's CGI and it's falsified.
Yeah.
Flipping to the opposite side of somebody who knows that the Earth is a sphere or spherical object in space. I've looked and observed many planets over the years. I mean, there's not many. There's only sort of 8, 9 if you include Pluto, which has been sort of, yes, it's a planet, no, it's a planet. But if you look at some of the large gas giants like Jupiter, Saturn, even looking at Mars, which is the closest to us, you can see the moons, and you can see the moons as day by day changing their positions, and those planets themselves rotate on their axis, so you can see on the axis, so you can see them turning. To pass them off as just shimmering lights on the inside of a dome, I find it very hard to defend that. Also, if you could step yourself away from the Earth into interstellar space or into our solar system, you would look at therefore spherical planets and one flat plate of a Earth, which
So we're led to believe that other planets are globes, but
No.
our planet is a...
No, that's the thing. From the flat Earth's perspective, they are just shimmering lights on the inside of this.
On the inside of the dome.
Ethereal dome that's thousands
I want to
of
know
miles up.
what's on the outside of this dome.
It's one of the other things is
Other
you
domes.
mentioned
Bigger domes.
earlier about
Bigger domes.
stars, and I mentioned about constellations. From the flat Earth's perspective, I think it's very difficult for them to comprehend the vastness of space, the vastness, even though on the grand scale of things the planet Earth isn't huge, but as a human being, or if you were an ant, it would be even more vast than as it is.
It's almost incomprehensibly huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's very difficult for some people to comprehend that kind of vastness,
And almost insignificance
but also
in the universe.
that was one that came up, and they said, I refuse to accept that I'm that insignificant, therefore it can't be true. We must be.
That goes a lot deeper into that individual psychology, though, isn't it?
They don't want to be a
They
tiny
want to
bit
be-
of dust on a piece of dust. Yeah. So the size of everything becomes so difficult to comprehend, but also time. Because one of the questions that was thrown up a lot was, I look at the sky and I see constellations, but if the Earth was moving all the time, then those constellations, we wouldn't keep seeing the same constellations. They would keep moving all the time. They'd be all over the place. And it's like the velocity of the planet circling the sun. Well, we're sitting here now.
Why don't we feel it?
Why don't we feel that movement? See, we're not actually moving.
But-
Flat Earth doesn't move. It's just stationary. And there's no gravity. Gravity is the other big lie.
Okay.
So, gravity is the other big
Can I
lie.
have something to drop?
No.
But a flat earther would take that information that you just said about how there is no gravity, there is gravity, but it's all to do with how heavy an object is,
Yeah.
I think is what I...
Yeah.
But they would take that as unexplainable because they cannot, as we said earlier, comprehend that would be the science that explains it.
The explanation I've
So
had
they kind of make up their own...
for gravity is that gravity is just, again, it's just a made-up concept.
Yes.
That the reason things, and again, I'm kind of quoting what the research I've done, the reason things, as you just mentioned, fall downwards is because different things have different weights, and weight means that they drop to the floor.
Now,
And what forces them to the floor is not gravity, but it's the suction and the energy from the dome pressing in, which keeps us all.
So we're in almost like a giant plunger.
Yeah, I was imagining a plunger, but surely you'd go up in that case.
We wouldn't.
float.
Yeah, we'd go to the top of the dome, wouldn't we?
Yeah, not down.
That's how suction works. But
Yeah.
Yeah,
who knows
we're
what's-
being pulled by that energy.
Well, that's our belief of suction, anyway.
Yeah, well, there's this.
But wouldn't we be
I don't
all
quite know
pulled
exactly
towards
how
the
it.
pole?
I don't
We'll
know
get
how.
pulled towards the centre of the flat Earth.
Well, I don't exactly know how they work this one out, but the idea is that gravity isn't a thing. It's the energy from the celestial dome that presses and pushes everything towards the surface of the flat Earth. And that, well, one of the other things that the sun, for example, the sun generates electricity. So sunlight produces electricity, and the whole planet works from magnetism, and part of that magnetism is part of the energy that keeps us on the planet. Not quite sure how that works. And one flat earther was describing how solar panels, nobody knows how they work. That actually they don't produce electricity. All they do is they capture the
They absorb it.
electricity.
It's magic.
They capture the electricity that's being sent out from the sun. The sun is like this big electric generator that beams out.
The giant plug socket.
Well, I think they were saying that the sun and the moon being the same size, and they're only something like 15 kilometres
I did see that. Yeah,
Across
I think they said
some-
17 miles or something.
across. Yeah.
Yeah, it was something
Yeah.
something like that.
And,
But what I find, obviously, we're not going to be able to answer every question that we have because we don't have anyone here that is actually a flat
well, no, I'm
earther.
hoping that the people listening to this, after they listen to this, will put in the comments things that we can feed back on.
But what I find most interesting is the psychological side of things. How, to us, it's kind of incomprehensible that you'd believe that the Earth is flat. But there is obviously some kind of social or psychological thing that people want to feel like they have, like we said earlier, a moral high ground,
Yes,
as it were.
or ultimate understanding of
Yes.
our place
and
in
I
the
think that
universe.
does link into the idea that you don't want to feel insignificant because we are so tiny.
everyone wants to feel special.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think for me,
I just find that side, I just find the
so
psychological side
if I
really
take,
interesting.
if I take my flat Earth hat off and put my spherical,
Oh my god,
globe-
it's a flat hat.
yeah, I take my flat hat off and
A
put
flat
my
cap if it were.
put my dome hat on.
You're wearing a globe on your head.
You should see him right now.
It suits me. It's good, isn't it? You know, Australia isn't there. I hope you noticed.
No, it's been scrubbed out with marker pen for some reason.
It does not exist. That thing that Zach said about being insignificant, actually, I find that it makes you even more significant
Yeah.
because you're such a finite thing that
It makes
that
you
has-
cherish the life
cherish
you
the
have.
life you've been given
Yeah. I think
more than
it's-
feeling overwhelmed by the vastness of everything trying to make you feel insignificant. It makes me feel even more
Yeah.
that each and every one of us is just so uniquely special.
We're all aware of Brian Cox. the
Oh yes, yeah,
scientist.
Professor Brian Cox.
I really like his philosophy on the fact that the chances of us being here is just almost incomprehensible. We're here for a split second
Such a minute chance.
in the
Yeah.
vastness of almost
Time, yes.
infinite time. So instead of questioning all of this stuff, this is probably a good way to finish the episode actually. Instead of questioning all these things and trying to figure out if we're on a flat plane, if we're on a globe, we just appreciate the time that we have here for the small time that we're here. Nothing's guaranteed. We're here for a split second. We are a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we just make the most of...
Why are we not happy with that?
Yes.
Yeah, but, well,
Be happy with what we have now instead of
Hmm.
kind of questioning everything.
that's because we're in the Matrix.
Oh, that's a different episode.
No. Well, yeah,
be
again,
continued.
to be continued. But again, with the flat Earth, that is one of those things they like to refer to as the Matrix movie. That you're
Oh.
being lied to, and it's only when you break free of that you see that.
The Wachowskis knew too
Yeah.
much. Keanu Reeves
Yeah.
will save us.
I do want to fly back to where it all stems from, though, briefly, and that is, like you say, people accepting, trying to explain the world that they exist within, and of
Yes.
course, as cartography began at some point, where people start to draw rudimentary maps and things,
Figure out distances. And
distances, but you're going to expand that map outwards, and of
Mm.
course, a map is on a flat piece of parchment.
It's a rectangle.
That's so people assume
Rectangular.
that.
Rectangle Earth theory. We started now.
So people are assuming, obviously, what you're living on is this flat plane anyway.
yeah.
So you can see how
Such a misconception could kind of.
can develop that,
Yeah.
that you're living on a flat, and you're drawing a circle with what you know as far as continents and islands are concerned within that circle, and beyond that is sea and, dragons live here. What is it?
Here be dragons.
Here be dragons. Here
Or
be sea monsters.
Sea monsters, yeah.
That's it. So, people...
Beyond what is known.
Exactly. You'll go off the edge. But that's understandable. That's perfectly understandable.
You can, from a historical perspective, you can kind of understand why people would think.
But you have the historical, and then you have the religious belief, and it all gets mixed up. And it is very difficult to understand in the 21st century why it seems to have suddenly become exploded.
Especially with kind of like the lack of communication and information they would have had back then. For example, if you send a ship off into the distance and it disappears over the horizon,
Why can't you see it?
your first thought is, that's just fallen off the edge of the earth. Yes. There must be a drop there that we've not...
That's interesting. I was listening to a podcast where one gentleman was saying that's one way of proving the earth is flat, because the horizon, the word horizon means horizontal, and that sea level, the sea level, that water can't be...
It's not a slight deformation.
It can't be a sea dome.
It doesn't work like a level for a shelf.
But you'll like this. If you watch that ship travel off to the horizon and disappear, you think it's gone over the horizon, therefore there must be a curvature to the planet.
Right.
But if you get yourself a telescope, you'll see it again. And if it disappears, you get an even more powerful telescope, you'll see it again. And actually, it never goes off the edge. It's just you can't see that far.
So you're saying if I had a telescope...
That's
okay,
if I stood on top of my house...
Yep.
And I had a telescope that was powerful enough, I could see, for instance, the Eiffel Tower.
The pyramids of Giza.
Pyramids of Giza.
Eiffel Tower.
Theoretically, yes, but...
I don't think I'd be able to.
That's the theory of flat Earth.
But I don't have the telescope.
Does France exist?
No.
Yeah, they were talking. Yeah, there was other people saying that a proof that the Earth must be flat is that if you use a radio and you send a signal out, that signal goes out, like in all directions, and you pick that signal up. But if you are able to pick a signal up, again, I've just used the term Australia. You picked a signal up from the UK in Australia, that if it was going out in all directions off a globe, it wouldn't get to Australia. It just, it would go out. If Australia is the opposite side of the planet, it'll never reach it. So therefore, it must be flat because it travels in a straight line and gets to Australia straight.
But that's not how that works.
I know.
I hate to burst your bubble that's also flat.
I've got my flat hat on. I've got my flat hat.
Oh, the globe's gone.
Now, talking about experiments.
Yep.
Now, wasn't there a laser experiment that kind of
I heard about this. Yeah.
was used to kind of try and prove flat Earth?
There was one that was featured in the documentary called Beyond the Curve. And the team of flat earthers in that documentary had set up a series of boards over a set few miles, hole in the board, beamed a laser through the hole. It should meet the next one and go through the hole, and should meet the next one and go through the hole, and meet the next one and go through the hole.
Because a laser is dead straight, and it will always be dead straight.
And these were all set up equidistant from each other. And the further it went away, it kept missing the hole and ended up being higher on the board. They had to keep lifting the boards up.
So they proved themselves wrong.
They did prove themselves wrong.
That's all.
Which was unfortunate, but there you go.
That was at the end of the documentary, wasn't it?
So, flat Earth. It's a huge subject.
One that we could probably talk about for another however many hours.
We've kind of scratched the
have
surface
many
on the bun.
Yes.
On the bun. Well, that's it, because it follows into hollow Earth theory is part of the flat Earth theory.
Are the moon landings fake?
Kind of flat object.
Well, yeah.
hollow.
Again, I'm sure there's people that are listening that are saying exactly the same things as Zach, about the moon landings, etc. That they've all been faked.
Satellites. Have we talked about satellites?
I was about to ask, in terms of like your phone signal and everything, that all comes from satellites. So can we send satellites beyond the dome, or was everything?
No, I don't think.
Or
Please,
they
if you're
not exist?
if you're a flat earther, please put in the comments about satellites. I understood
I would love
that.
to hear from
I understood that satellites again are a lie, because you don't need them, because being flat, anything that you beam out just goes out in all directions.
Right.
So you don't need to beam up to a satellite to beam down to get around the curvature of the
Beam me
planet.
up,
you
Scotty.
see.
What's underneath the plane? What's on the other side of the disc?
Nobody knows.
I'm sure in
see,
some kind of
There is
mythology.
the flat Earth. There's the flat Earth with the hollow Earth also, and there is the layered Earth, which is
So there's
something
multiple
slightly-
levels.
Like an ice cream
multiple
cone.
levels,
Yeah.
as well as having,
Cone Earth.
as well as well. That's the thing. You might laugh, but it does strike me as being unusual that you would argue between being a flat disc or a globe. You may as well be saying, it's a dodecahedron or something like that.
Yeah.
If you're gonna, but
But
I
technically,
mean,
it's not even a sphere as such, is it?
well, no.
if you look at
It's
the Earth,
imperfect.
if you look at
An
there's
imperfect sphere.
there's a good picture of the Earth without water on that someone's done a 3D model of the
It's a
Earth.
lumpy rock.
It is very much. It's almost like an egg shape.
Yeah. But if, for example, we've got water, we don't need to do this experiment in the sound booth at the moment because we'll get wet. But if you if you get your water bottle,
It's not that sort of podcast.
and it's not that sort of podcast. If you just drip some water out of your bottle, it does that drip. What does it immediately do?
Hit the ground.
No. But what shape does it take?
Oh,
It's a droplet.
It immediately goes from being a droplet as it breaks off of the surface tension of the water it's coming from, and immediately becomes
Sphere.
a perfect
forms a
sphere.
sphere, yeah.
Aerodynamic.
No, not so much aerodynamic. that is surface tension and gravity working on it. It
And
becomes
It's
a
almost
sphere.
creating I don't know. Does that sound silly? It's almost creating a very tiny Earth. If that makes sense. Not obviously, it's not a planet. It's a piece
No,
of
it's a
water.
piece of water.
But in science.
But in
yeah.
terms of gravity, it's making a sphere,
That's
which is
right.
what.
And that's obviously the water tension as well. But it doesn't go to any other shape. It goes to the
And it will
close to
always go to
Yeah.
to
that,
that shape.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what water you use, or
Any liquid.
liquid should do the same.
And particles are round as well.
Mm.
So we're
We're going to need to get deep science now.
we're
Roll back the
we're,
GCSE site.
we're a flat Earth in a universe of spheres.
Yeah. I genuinely find the psychology very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you believe something but you can't prove it,
Yeah.
you can argue it one way or the other.
Mm.
But if you said to me the pyramids of Giza don't exist,
Yeah.
although I have never
Yeah.
seen them physically, I know I could get on a plane, fly to
Yeah.
Egypt, and physically see them. I would like to think that if I had enough money to be able to get on a space rocket and go up
Yeah.
to the International Space Station, then I could say, I'm looking down on the planet Earth.
It's a
Mm.
giant
It's-
globe.
it's
Now,
a giant
what would
globe.
happen?
But if you took a flat...
Yeah,
where
that's
you
what I was about to say.
go.
So if you put a flat earther on a rocket and
Exact
sent
same rocket.
exact same rocket and sent them up to the International Space Station, how would they react?
They would probably, I would assume, please put in the comments if you in this one, I would assume they'd say that the moment they got onto that rocket, they had been hypnotized, given drugs or whatever,
Put in a simulation or
put in
something.
a simulation. It's CGI, it's not real.
Right.
But then that kind of, to me, that argument of it's all CGI or they don't want you to know
Don't want you to know.
is almost a definitive answer to any theory, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is.
Because you could ask me anything, and I could say, well, they don't want you to know.
Well, that's it.
And that's it. There's no
It's a flat out
think
denying.
there's no
something.
discussion there.
No,
it's
I
it's
think-
almost putting an end to
But it's
I'm
kind
right,
of...
you're wrong.
exactly. Yeah.
I think it's an interesting thing that I've discovered personally, or it feels this way to me, that when you have a conspiracy theory, you immediately, like with flat Earth, and I never really wanted to call it conspiracy theory because I just came into it just being a myth, yeah. But the people who believe in it 100% seem to, that's the truth. Now we need to find out what evidence we can prove that that's the truth.
And they latch onto
Instead of saying, we believe that's the truth, and now we need to take scientific steps towards that
that and prove
to prove it before we believe it.
it's jumping the
It's
gun
believing it first, 100%.
and only
Like
accepting
with
the
most
things that prove
conspiracy
it.
theories, people who believe in a conspiracy theory will believe that conspiracy theory 100%,
Yeah.
and then look for things to prove them right.
Do the research after.
Rather than doing it the opposite way, we're saying, I would assume that's the answer, but I
Let's
need
see.
to do the research to get there to prove it first. And until it's proven, I can't fully believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
almost thinking backwards almost.
thinking backwards. So again, right from the beginning of this podcast, guys, I said I was going to defend Flat Earth. I've tried my best.
You've definitely answered.
Tried my best.
Tried.
I've tried my best. I find it very difficult. I got to be honest. Personal. No.
I'm not convinced.
Not convinced in the slightest. That you cannot. No, the Flat Earth theory.
However, I would be really interested to hear if anyone out there is listening to this and they do believe that the Earth is flat. I would love to hear their opinion
And what they think.
and maybe give us some answers to some of the questions in this podcast that we haven't quite got to the bottom of.
If we've misinterpreted their belief,
Yes.
come to us, because we're not here to point fingers at anybody.
We've stayed neutral the whole
We've
time.
tried to stay neutral.
Yeah.
We're not laughing at anybody. We're not trying to run anybody down. We're just opening it up. For the listeners, the whole concept of the Now We Know show is I'm sure
learn.
people have listened to this podcast and already learned things that they otherwise didn't know about the
Yes.
theory of Flat Earth.
Yes.
And that's what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, it opens up a conversation. That's what we want to
Exactly. Who knows? Maybe we'll get somebody who's willing to come into the studio and tell us more
Yeah.
about Flat Earth.
Well, I've certainly learned stuff in
do.
this
Yeah,
episode.
definitely. Yeah.
Or maybe get somebody to come in and give us the definitive answer of why.
Brian
the Earth
Cox,
is
if you're-
Brian Cox,
if you're
Professor Brian Cox. If you're listening.
Clocks.
No, not Brian. No, Brian Cox is the guy who deals with time.
Or Brian Clogs, who wears wooden shoes.
Now, Professor Brian Cox, if you're listening, or if you come across this, or you're told about this, please feel free to drop in and explain to everybody why.
That would be a dream podcast. That
That
would.
would be a dream podcast.
I'm not sure we'd fit.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have the budget for that.
Yeah, we don't have the budget, but there you go. Maybe he'll do it for free.
Yes.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. And toes. Right, I think on that we'll probably call it a day on the
I've
flat
certainly learned stuff.
Flat Earth.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot.
I dare say there's loads more questions we can ask on this subject. But for now,
Yes.
There we go.
that's the Flat Earth theory for you.
As described as best as we possibly can.
Possibly can. Defended as best as possibly I can.
Yes. Thank you, Buzz. That was very informative.
That's right, Jack.
And me.
And you, Zach. Right, so thank you for listening to the Now We Know show. If you have any suggestions on further subjects we can cover, please put them in the comments.
All things, activities we can do.
Yeah,
Yes. We're open to pretty much anything.
Pretty
Yeah.
much. There is a line.
There is a line.
There is a line. Yeah, we don't necessarily want to know about everything. There's probably certain subjects in there that can basically.
We'll get
Anyway.
to them eventually.
Yeah.
We run out of other ideas.
Anyway, our next podcast, are we going to mention the subject we're going to
Yep.
be doing? Something completely different from Flat Earth. We are going to be looking at Japanese snacks.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Yes, Japanese snacks. We're doing a taste tester on Japanese
Yes.
snacks.
Goodness.
Which none of us know anything
I know
Anything about.
nothing about this.
So this could be interesting. So please listen to the next podcast. In the meantime,
Instead of expanding our minds, we're expanding our palates.
Please like and subscribe to the channel. It will be greatly appreciated. And please comment below anything you'd like to say.
so thank you very much. It's goodbye from Buzz.
Goodbye from Zach.
And goodbye from Jack.